What if I told you that a country half the size of its enemy, running low on soldiers, running low on weapons, and running low on time, is quietly doing something the entire world said could never be done? Something so massive, so unexpected, that you can literally see it from outer space, and yet almost no one is talking about it. Before I take you deeper into this story, do me one small favor. If you enjoy videos that break down world events in a way that actually makes sense, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and share this video with someone who still thinks nothing surprising happens in this war. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll want them to see what I'm about to show you. Let's rewind for a moment. Go back to the year 2014. Ukraine was going through a revolution. The streets of Kiev were full of protests. The government was collapsing, and the country was in chaos. And right in the middle of all that noise, something strange happened in a place called Crimea. Crimea is a peninsula that sticks out into the Black Sea from southern Ukraine. It's beautiful, it's strategic, and empires have been fighting over it for hundreds of years. But in modern times, it belonged to Ukraine. Everyone accepted that. Everyone, that is, until soldiers in green uniforms with no flags, no badges, and no country markings suddenly appeared on the streets. Nobody knew who they were at first, but within days, the truth was out. They were Russian special forces, and they were taking Crimea for Vladimir Putin. It happened so fast that the world barely had time to react. Russian tanks rolled in, Russian ships blocked the ports. Russian troops surrounded Ukrainian military bases, and just like that, Crimea was gone. Putin then went on television, smiled for the cameras, and declared that Crimea was now part of Russia. Just like that, in the 21st century, in Europe. One country simply took a chunk of another country and kept it. The world was stunned. This was not supposed to happen anymore. This was the kind of thing we read about in history books. Not the kind of thing we watched unfold on the news. But Putin didn't care. He redrew Russia's maps to include Crimea. He built a giant bridge across the sea to physically connect Crimea to Russia. He even took a personal victory lap, driving across that bridge like a tourist showing off his new property. He flooded Crimea with Russian shops, Russian money, Russian television, Russian schools, and Russian tourists. For 12 long years, this is how Crimea has lived. An entire generation of children has grown up believing they are Russian. The world hated it, the world protested it, but the world could not change it. Until now. Because a few weeks ago, something shifted. Something so quiet at first that most people missed it. But when you look at satellite images of Crimea, images taken from space every single night, you start to see it. Take a random night back in February. Zoom in on Crimea. It glows. The cities shine. The roads are lit up. 2.5 million people going about their lives. Now jump forward to June. Suddenly, the glow is fading. The lights are dimmer. Whole neighborhoods look darker. Now jump again to July, and it looks like a completely different place. Like a black hole in the middle of the map. Almost no light. Almost no life. Almost nothing. Side by side, it looks like the difference between North Korea and South Korea at night. That is not normal. That is not a power outage. That is a country being slowly strangled. And the country doing the strangling is Ukraine. Yes, Ukraine. The same country that everyone had written off. The same country the world told to accept its losses and move on. That country is now doing the impossible. 12 years after losing Crimea, Ukraine is fighting back. And they are winning in ways nobody predicted. So today, we are going to answer 3 big questions. How is Ukraine doing this against a bigger, richer, more powerful Russia? What does it mean for the future of this war? And the biggest question of all, can Ukraine actually take Crimea back? Stay with me, because the answer might not be what you expect. And let's start with the map. Picture Ukraine on the left, Russia on the right, and a big red zone in the middle. That red zone is the part of Ukraine currently under Russian control. And right at the bottom, hanging off the coast like a diamond, is Crimea. For years now, the front line has barely moved. It shifts a few miles here and there, but nothing dramatic. Russia holds what it holds, Ukraine holds what it holds, and everyone else watches from the sidelines. But look closer at Crimea, and you'll notice something interesting. It's connected to Russia by one very important thing, a bridge. The Crimea Bridge, sometimes called the Kerch Bridge, was Putin's pride and joy. He built it in 2018 to physically link Russia to its stolen territory. It's 10 miles long, it has 4 lanes of highway and 2 railway lines. It is a real engineering marvel, and for Putin, it was proof that Crimea was Russian forever. Then, in 2022, Ukraine did something nobody thought was possible. They packed a truck with explosives, timed it perfectly with a passing fuel train, and blew a huge chunk of the bridge into the sea. The damage was so bad that Russia had to shut it down to heavy trucks and tanks forever. Cars can still cross, some trains can still cross, but the big military convoys, the heavy supplies, those days are done. That multi-billion-dollar bridge, the symbol of Putin's control, became almost useless overnight. So Russia had to find new ways to keep Crimea alive. They set up two backup routes. The first one was the sea, a constant stream of ferries, cargo ships, and oil tankers running from Russian ports down to Crimea, crossing the Sea of Azov. The second one was a long highway running from the Russian city of Rostov, all the way through the occupied Ukrainian territory, down into Crimea. Russia gave this road a very telling name. They called it the Novorossiya Highway. Novorossiya means New Russia. It's the name Russia used to call Ukraine back in the 1700s and 1800s when they controlled it. Subtle, right? For a long time, these two routes worked. The sea was safe because Russia's navy is massive and Ukraine barely has one. The highway was safe because it ran through territory Russia fully controls. And both were protected by one of the most fearsome air defense networks in the world. Let me explain what that means. Russia has these systems called Pantsir. Imagine a truck with a giant radar on top and a bunch of small missiles and machine guns ready to fire. The radar scans the sky, spots any drone or aircraft flying nearby, and shoots it down in seconds. On top of that, Russia has scattered thousands of tiny portable radars across the occupied zone. And most of them don't look like radars at all. They look like little suitcase-sized panels, hidden on rooftops, hidden on radio towers, hidden anywhere they can blend in. The second, a Ukrainian drone appears in the sky. One of these little radars sees it, and within seconds, either a missile shoots it down, a jammer knocks it out, or a Russian drone flies over and rams it. The whole red zone had become an invisible wall. A no-fly zone for Ukrainian drones. A no-go zone for Ukrainian troops. So how do you break through a wall like that? How do you cross an invisible battlefield where every step is watched, every drone is hunted, and every truck is protected? For years, Ukraine couldn't figure it out. But this summer, they cracked the code. Quick pause here. If this story is blowing your mind even a little bit, do me one more favor. Drop a comment below with just one word, the word impossible. That's it. It tells the algorithm this video is worth pushing to more people, and it helps me know you're still with me. Now let's keep going, because the next part is where things get truly wild. Ukraine's breakthrough came from two big changes. The first was mental. They stopped trying to destroy Russia's entire air defense network because they realized that was impossible. Every time they knocked out a radar, Russia would simply replace it. So instead of trying to kill the whole system, they started opening small holes in it. Tiny windows in space and time. A single area, blinded for just a few days, was enough to push a wave of drones through the gap and hit something valuable on the other side. Here's how they do it. Ukrainian drone hunters study the map. They pick a small section of the front. Then they launch a wave of attacks on every radar, every jammer, and every anti-drone system in that one section. For a few days, that patch of sky goes dark for the Russians. And in those few days, Ukraine floods the area with attack drones. They hit airfields, they hit fuel depots, they hit ammunition warehouses. By the time Russia patches the hole, the damage is already done. Then Ukraine moves to the next section and does it again, and again, and again. The second big change is even more interesting. It's about how Ukraine builds and improves its weapons. In most countries, including the United States, military technology moves slowly. A new tank or drone is designed. It's built, it's tested, it's shipped to soldiers years later. Then when soldiers use it in real combat, their feedback has to travel back up the chain, through generals, through contractors, through committees. Before any changes can be made, it's a system built for peacetime. It's slow. Ukraine threw that system in the trash. Instead, they invited the drone builders to live with the soldiers. Engineers are embedded directly on the front lines. Soldiers can order new drones through a website, like ordering pizza, and customize them for what they need that week. If a drone fails in the field on Monday, an engineer can redesign it on Tuesday, and a new version is flying by Friday. It's fast, it's messy, it's chaotic, and it's working. For years, Russia was ahead in the drone race because they had more money, more scientists, and more factories. But since Ukraine changed how they build and fix drones, they've started leaving Russia behind. Ukrainian drones evolve every single week. Russian drones evolve every few months. And that gap is now everything. Once Ukraine could punch holes in Russia's radar, they punched bigger holes in Russia's air defenses. And once those air defenses were gone, they went after the real target. Trucks. Yes, trucks. Because trucks are what keep an army alive. Trucks carry the fuel, the food, the bullets, the medicine. Cut the trucks and the army starves. And the Novorossiya Highway, that great supply road Russia was so proud of, was suddenly a shooting gallery. Hours and hours of drone footage started appearing online. A Russian oil tanker on the highway, exploding. A convoy of military trucks ripped apart. A tank rolling down the road, blown up before it can even shoot back. Ukraine started calling the road something new, not the Novorossiya Highway, the Highway of Death. By late June, they were claiming 20 strikes a day on this road. Some of the drone videos are almost unbelievable. In one clip, A Russian drone flying above the road zooms in on the pavement and shows small objects sitting on the surface. Those objects are Ukrainian drones. They're not flying. They're parked. They landed on the road and are waiting for a Russian truck to drive by. Then they pop up, chase it, and destroy it. This is the level of control Ukraine now has over that highway. Russian occupation officials panicked and shut the road to civilians. Traffic dropped to a trickle. Trucks stopped coming. Fuel started running out. And the highway had one more weakness, right where it enters Crimea. A set of critical bridges. Ukraine hit them, one after another. Big explosions, big holes. Russia tried to build a floating pontoon bridge to replace them, but it was only big enough for small cars. Then they started digging a dirt path across the water. It's a game of cat and mouse. Russia builds, Ukraine destroys. Russia rebuilds, Ukraine destroys again. And every time it happens, the flow of supplies into Crimea slows a little bit more. So Russia turned to its backup, the sea route. And for a few weeks, it seemed to work. Hundreds of ferries, cargo ships, and oil tankers began crossing the Sea of Azov. It looked like a strange reverse Dunkirk. Instead of evacuating soldiers, ships were rushing supplies in. Then, in the last week of June, Ukraine cracked open the sky over the sea. And what happened next was one of the most one-sided moments of the entire war. Over the next 10 days, Ukraine used naval drones and aerial drones to hit ship after ship after ship. 147 Russian vessels were sunk or crippled. Some of them were oil tankers carrying tens of thousands of tons of fuel. One video that went viral shows a small Ukrainian sea drone racing toward a giant Russian oil tanker while the crew fires wildly at it, trying to stop it. They miss. The drone hits, the tanker burns. That is the reality now. Analysts released a map showing every ship in the Sea of Azov on June 30th. It's full of dots, ships moving in every direction. Then they released the same map 12 days later. The sea was almost empty, just a couple of tiny dots hugging the Russian coast. Everything else was frozen in port. The sea route was dead. So think about what Russia has left. The bridge is broken for heavy vehicles. The highway is a graveyard. The sea is closed. 3 lifelines, all cut. And Crimea is starting to feel it. If you've made it this far, seriously, I appreciate you. Most people won't sit through a story this deep, and you did. If you want more videos where I break down world events like this, take 1 second to make sure you're subscribed and turn on the notification bell, because YouTube doesn't always tell you when I post. All right, back to the story. Now, Ukraine turned its attention to the peninsula itself. Oil depots inside Crimea started exploding, power plants started catching fire, fuel stations ran dry. This is where things get interesting, because you might be thinking, wait a minute, if Ukraine wants to take Crimea back, why are they destroying its infrastructure? Why are they knocking out the very bridges they would need to march an army across? Why are they blowing up the roads they would need to send tanks down? The answer is honest, and it's kind of shocking. Ukraine is not trying to retake Crimea, not right now, not with tanks and troops and flags and parades, because they know they can't, not yet. The land route into Crimea is still a nightmare for any invading force. Russia has thousands of tanks in that red zone. Russia can still spot and destroy anything bigger than a dirt bike moving toward the peninsula. Sending a Ukrainian army across that ground would be a bloodbath. So no, Ukraine is not planning a victory parade in Crimea anytime soon. But that doesn't mean they've failed. In fact, they are winning something much bigger than a piece of land. They are winning a war of perception, a war of leverage, and a war of pressure. Let me show you what I mean. Look at these images from Crimea in the last few weeks. Long lines of cars at gas stations, some of them stretching for miles, waiting hours for fuel, rolling blackouts, leaving whole cities in the dark, empty grocery store shelves, phone service dropping, internet cutting out. And then, most telling of all, this, a different line of cars. This one is not waiting for gas. It's waiting to leave. Russian civilians and Russian tourists lining up on the Crimea Bridge, packing up their lives and getting out while they can. At night, you can hear the buzz of Ukrainian drones overhead. You can understand why they're leaving. Here's the twist. Ukraine is deliberately leaving parts of the Crimea Bridge open. Not because they can't destroy it, but because they want the Russians to leave. Every family that flees Crimea is one less Russian claiming the peninsula is theirs. One Ukrainian general put it perfectly. He said the goal isn't to capture land at any cost. The goal is to make holding on to that land as painful and expensive as possible for the enemy. That is the real strategy. Make Crimea a burden. Make it a bleeding wound. Make it a place Russia can't defend, can't supply, can't enjoy, and can't afford to keep. And here's why that matters so much. This war has reached a strange point. Neither side can win outright. Russia will never reach Kiev. That dream died a long time ago. But Ukraine can't push Russia all the way home either. Most long wars end this way. They end in negotiations, and peace deals, and compromises. And in those negotiations, position is everything. The stronger your position when the talking starts, the better the deal you walk away with. For 10 years, Putin has been trying to convince the world that Crimea is untouchable. He built the bridge. He redrew the maps. He filled it with Russian tourists and Russian soldiers. He wanted Ukraine and the West to give up on ever getting it back. And for a while, it was working. Even Ukraine's own allies were quietly telling them to accept the loss, to let Crimea go, to focus on saving what they could. But now, everything is different. Now Crimea looks weak. Now Crimea looks contested. Now Crimea looks like a place that could slip out of Russia's hands. That changes the negotiating table completely. If Ukraine ever has to trade Crimea in a peace deal, they can now demand something huge in return, because Putin can no longer pretend that Crimea is safely his. He needs Ukraine's cooperation just to keep it. And that flips the entire logic of the war. There is another prize hidden inside this strategy. Look at this region up north, called the Donbass. It's another piece of Ukrainian land that Putin desperately wants. For years, he has been trying to conquer it. But there is one problem. A cluster of small, well-defended cities known as the Fortress Belt. Towns like Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. They've been hit hard. They've been shelled for years. But they are still standing. And as long as they stand, Russia cannot fully take the Donbass. Putin's plan has always been to use Crimea as a giant military base to attack the Donbass from the south. He calls Crimea an unsinkable aircraft carrier. He filled it with airfields, missile launchers, and thousands of troops. From there, he pushed north into the Donbass. But now that Crimea is cut off, now that fuel is running short, now that trucks can't get in, those southern attacks are weakening. And Ukraine is holding the line in the Donbass better than expected. Russia is being squeezed. The unsinkable aircraft carrier is starting to sink. There's one last piece to this puzzle, and it might be the biggest one of all. Ukraine's president has said many times, publicly and privately, that the true goal of this campaign is not just Crimea, not just the Donbass, but something much bigger. To force Russia to choose peace, to force Putin to end this war. For most of this conflict, Putin has believed that time was on his side. He believed that the longer he fought, the weaker Ukraine would become, and the stronger Russia would grow. He believed that every day of fighting brought him more land, more leverage, more power at the eventual negotiating table. So why would he ever stop? Why would he ever agree to peace? He wouldn't, unless someone flipped that logic upside down. And that is exactly what Ukraine is doing right now. For the first time, Russia is losing ground. For the first time, Putin has to worry about protecting Crimea instead of expanding from it. For the first time, the longer the war drags on, the worse his position might get, not better. That changes his entire calculation. Suddenly, ending the war soon is more attractive than fighting on forever. Suddenly, a peace deal doesn't look like a defeat. It looks like a way to lock in what he has before he loses more. And Ukraine is not stopping at Crimea. They are using their new drone abilities to strike deep inside Russia. Oil refineries, airfields, ammunition factories, cities that used to feel safe thousands of miles from the front are now hearing air raid sirens. For the first time in this war, the pain is flowing in both directions. Russian citizens who used to see the war as a distant television show are now waking up to explosions in their own neighborhoods. And that changes everything about how the Russian public sees this fight. Now, does that mean Ukraine has already won? No. This war has surprised everyone from the very first day. It has flipped back and forth so many times that no one should predict how it ends. 6 months from now, the momentum could shift again. New weapons could change the balance. Politics inside America or Europe could pull the rug out from under Ukraine at any moment. This story is far from over. But right now, in this moment, something is happening that few people believed was possible. A smaller, poorer, outnumbered country is outsmarting a larger, richer, better armed empire. Ukraine is not doing it with bigger tanks or more soldiers. They are doing it with brains, with speed, with cheap drones built in garages, with soldiers who refuse to lose, and with a strategy that treats every problem as something to be solved rather than something to be feared. They are turning the world's most feared air defense network into Swiss cheese. They are turning Putin's crown jewel into his greatest weakness. They are turning his unsinkable aircraft carrier into a slowly sinking ship. And they are doing it while the world barely pays attention, while the headlines focus on other stories, while everyone assumes nothing new is happening. But something new is happening, something historic, something that will be studied in military schools for the next 100 years. A war being changed not by empire and army, but by imagination and courage. So the next time someone tells you that a smaller country cannot beat a bigger one, that a weaker army cannot defeat a stronger one, that history is written only by the powerful, remember these satellite images. Remember Crimea going dark. Remember the highway of death. Remember the empty sea. Remember the lights of a stolen peninsula fading one blackout at a time. Because sometimes the impossible is just the possible waiting for someone brave enough and smart enough to reach for it. And right now, in this quiet, strange, unforgettable summer, that someone is Ukraine.